Welcome back to Monday Musings, a casual conversation about culture and theology. I'm Justin Ely.
And I'm Daniel Chen. We're a couple guys talking about some stuff.
The stuff we're talking about today is what are, sorry, about to do a George W. Bushism right there. What are our children watching? We want to talk about screen time as parents, what we should allow our kids to watch, what we shouldn't, how much we should allow them to watch. Kids and screens is what we'll be talking about today.
And you know what's funny? I guess a lot of the principles we're going to talk about too, now that I'm thinking about it, apply to adults too. So if you're like, well, I don't have kids, but I'm like, well, if you have binged Netflix for 5 hours, a lot of the principles we're going to talk about still apply to you. So.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah, this is geared toward parents, but applicable probably to everybody.
Yeah, for sure. Because we all watch TV.
Yep. Unless you're Amish.
Right.
And which you probably don't. So maybe we should have interviewed an Amish person today.
But do Amish people listen to podcasts?
Probably not. Yeah, good point. Yeah. Yeah. Well, we're going to start with people that do listen to the podcast, mainly our listener of the month. Who do we got?
So our listener of the month is Ricardo Donato. And Ricardo, I don't know when you will listen to this, so I'll just tell the story. So Ricardo is becoming a member at our church this week. And he found out about our podcast from one of our elders, Tyler Linderman, about 2 weeks ago.
Thanks, Tyler.
From what I can understand, he has already listened to 40 or 50 episodes.
Man, wow. You're the man, Ricardo.
So thanks for listening. If you started from the beginning,
sorry.
I guess it'll only take you 2 more weeks to get here, but it might, this will be the last episode that you listen to probably if you started from the beginning. So.
Wow. Yeah. He's going to listen to all of them, and then he's going to realize he became listener of the month along the way,
Yes.
Thanks, Ricardo. Yes. Thanks for listening. Thanks for everybody that listens. And if this podcast has been a help to you, a blessing to you, we would appreciate a like or a share for the show so other people can get to know it and be benefited by it.
Yeah, for sure. Like, you know what? I feel like it's funny. You never know what people will like from the podcast, but I think our AI one last week was like a pretty popular episode.
I think it was pretty popular. Yeah. So yeah, this is actually we're not working on this episode today. AI is recording this episode for us. These aren't our real voices. It's all an illusion.
It would be crazy. Like one day that will be possible.
I know. Scary
with our voices. Yeah.
Ugh.
If you don't know what we're talking about, listen to the last episode.
Yeah.
It'll make more sense.
So today we're going to talk about what are our kids watching, kids and screens. How should we think about this? How do we think about this Christianly? And we want to start with kind of asking the question, why should parents be concerned? I mean, why should you even be thinking about screen time, what your kids are watching? I'd say the first reason is, screens are highly addictive. And we all have experienced this as adults. I mean, you put social media on your phone, and there's like a dopamine rush associated with, going to your social media, checking your account. And so we can become very addicted to screens of any kind. And so there's kind of great, to quote Peter Parker's aunt or uncle, with great power comes great responsibility, and screens bring great power. I'd say another reason is that stories really shape our understanding of the world, of life, of morality, what is good, what is true, what is beautiful. And so the stories we digest and the stories we expose ourselves to, this sounds dramatic, but really have an ability to set the course of our lives. It is no mistake that stories of old, like Lord of the Rings. They show friendship and sacrifice and self-giving love to be the good, the true, the beautiful. And many stories today show finding yourself to be the true, the good, the beautiful. So the stories we expose ourselves to kind of shape our trajectory, what we see as the telos of our lives.
Right.
And that's a reason to really think about what you're exposing yourself and your kids to.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And just going back to your first point with addictiveness, I just looked up what's the average screen time for kids. And for 2 to 4 year olds, the average screen time is 2 hours and 40 minutes
a day.
For 5 to 8 year olds, it's 3 hours. For 8 to 10 year olds, the average is 6 hours. 11 to 14 year olds, 9 hours. 15 to 18 year olds, 7.5 hours. But can you believe that?
Okay, so this is we're going to move this from a one podcast episode to a multi-part series because apparently we need some help with this. Those numbers are outrageous.
Yeah, and of course, you know, at least starting with the 11-year-olds, you're talking about not watching shows, but social media and phone stuff, and it's crazy. I was talking to a neighbor, and you know, when I was a kid, we had like the only computers that were around were like the big, like actual desktop computers, you know,
man.
and we would like chat on AIM or whatever. Now kids just like everyone has an iPad and no one uses like computers anymore. Like for like kids, everyone just has their iPad, and even video games, they just like play together on their iPad with their like headphones and stuff. It's pretty crazy. But with that, as you talk about the ability to shape morality, you know, I saw this meme yesterday of this mom who was reading, and her kid was also reading like on her lap on a subway, and the meme was like, you know, how did you get your kid to do that? And the response was like, kids don't listen to you, they imitate you. And the thing is, if they're watching TV instead of you, what are they going to imitate? Right? Kids are going to imitate what they see, not necessarily, you know, I don't think it's completely true that kids don't listen. Of course, kids listen, but like kids do imitate, right? They're going to say what you say, they're going to do what you do. And if they're not around you instead of a screen, who are they going to imitate? Whoever they're seeing on the screen. And so kids' minds are so impressionable. I mean, so are ours, but especially, you know, in the 0 to 5 age, right? And so I think it's incredibly important because you're right. Like, I don't think it's over dramatic to say shows and movies and whatever they're watching can really shape their morality. And kids are smart, you know, like, I think we think that kids learn slower than they do, you know, and kids are really smart. And so, but the last reason, and this is actually the reason that made me think of doing this podcast in general, is I feel like I'm a pretty like aware and conservative parent, in the sense of like, I don't want my kids to watch too much stuff. Like, I try to vet all the things that they watch. And then there are things I read recently that I think even showed some blind spots, even in my own like awareness, if that makes sense. Like, I don't feel like I was negligent, but I was still missing some things. And so, I think another reason kids should be concerned is, you know, I was talking about this with you, Justin, before we you know, recorded this podcast, but about how, you know, the kids show Blippi. And I think you mentioned that maybe you guys have seen it a couple times. Our kids used to watch it a little bit more often last year. But it's funny because when you first watch Blippi, if you've never seen it, it's just like this guy. It reminds you a little bit, I think, of like you said, like Blue's Clues, Justin. But it's just like a YouTube show, and he like dresses up as like a, you know, kind of more kiddish, and he talks in like a high pitched voice, and he goes to like these like playgrounds and different things like aquariums and stuff. And but then I read a article. I read an article about him, and uh it's crazy because of his background. So he started Blippi in like something like 2017 or something. And
Okay.
earlier that year, so like 8 months before he started Blippi, he had a YouTube channel called Steezy Grossman. And he would do really disturbing and disgusting things with his friends. And I'm sitting here like,
Uh,
I mean, this wasn't like, oh, he used to do this when he was a teenager, and then like years later he grew up and matured and started this kids channel. It was like this guy was doing disgusting, like shocking things on YouTube and wasn't getting views, and decided the way to get views was starting this kids channel. And uh that plus with, I was reading in this article about how Blippi isn't actually that educational. So like you take Blue's Clues, it like teaches kids how to like think through, like
sure.
logically solve
Sure.
problems, this kind of thing. Blippi, when I read that, I was like, because I watched those episodes of Blippi with my kids, I was like, that's right. He kind of just jumps around. He's not really teaching anything.
Hmm.
And one of the warnings that the
Hmm.
article gave, and you said you may, this might be a little bit of an over exaggeration, but with someone like Blippi, the article was kind of asking, what are the kind of people that kind of dress up as kids and show up as at kids' places?
Hmm.
Well, they're potentially people that want to harm your kids. And if you want to teach your kids to stay away from like the stranger danger thing,
Sure.
Blippi kind of desensitizes kids to adults at those
Hmm.
places, right? And so uh I was like, wow, I'd never thought about any of those things before. I didn't know the background of Blippi. It's like it
Sure.
reminded me like I should do research on who created the show, like how
Hmm.
did they come up with this?
Hmm.
What is the show actually teaching? I was like, oh, it's just a kids show, like the kids like it or whatever. And so I've stopped letting them watch Blippi. Another thing too, do you let your kids watch YouTube, like stuff on YouTube?
Unless it's like, yeah, we do some Coco Melon stuff on YouTube,
Yeah, that's what we do too. We do like
which I
some
hate. I hate
kids.
Coco Melon. It keeps me up at night.
I call it cocaine melon
It's like the
because
song
kids
that
get,
never ends.
yeah,
My
yep.
gosh.
Um,
Mommy, mommy. I know. Yeah.
yes, or yeah,
Yes,
yes, Papa.
JJ.
Yeah.
uh,
um, yeah, if you're a parent, I'm sorry, that's stuck in your head now.
yep.
So, but yeah, the YouTube, like I didn't think about how YouTube has an algorithm, and the algorithm will choose the next video to show your kids. And so I learned about something called Elsa Gate recently, where when Frozen was super popular, uh, parents would put on a Frozen themed YouTube video that had Elsa in it. And then these creepy adults decided to make all of these like creepy Elsa videos, some with like different superheroes, and some were like overly sexual. And then all of a sudden your 2 year old's watching Frozen. 30 minutes later, the algorithm, because the title says Elsa, is showing like adult content to your kids. And
That's so
when
messed up.
it's messed up. Yeah. So it's messed up from the adult side, but also if you think you can just leave your kids with YouTube for 30 minutes, you can't,
Yeah.
with something like Netflix, it's a little bit more controlled, right?
Sure.
But other things I've read recently is Sesame Street had a drag queen on their show in 2020. And
Right.
it's like, if you, I mean, I don't feel like you can ever now, uh, shows that are continue to make episodes. I feel like you got to vet all the shows now,
Yeah. No,
because
you do. You
because the
do.
article I read was called "What Happened to Sesame Street,"
Yep.
and given I think it was just this one episode, but you're you're busy, you're having a bad day, you set your kid in front of the TV to watch Sesame Street because for 50 years it was fine. then all
Right.
of a sudden your kid's learning about drag queens, and it's like, wait, what happened?
Yeah, no kidding. Gosh.
Um, there's a kids show on Netflix. It's called Ridley Jones. I found out
Yeah.
about recently. Oh, you heard about this?
I don't know what you're gonna say, but I'm aware of the show. Yeah.
Oh, you do know it?
Yeah.
So it's like about farm animals, but the cow on the show is like a gender non-binary cow that teaches kids about pronouns. And it's like a kid, it's like TVY, it's like 4 or 5 and under, and it's like created by this like LGBT uh like producer whose only goal is to teach kids about LGBT ideology. That's how Ridley Jones was created.
I thought Ridley Jones was about girl, a young girl, Indiana Jones.
Um, oh, you know what? Yeah, I don't know. Anyways, maybe, but sorry, the article I read and the videos I'm watching has a cow, I guess, that teaches kids about gender non-binary. It's
Are
like
you
pretty crazy.
are you sure that's from Ridley Jones?
Yeah, I mean that's what this article is saying.
Huh. Interesting.
But I guess that's even worse, right? I've never seen the show. But if the show is about girl Indiana Jones and they just slip the stuff in, you know what I mean?
Right.
Um, that's what I'm saying. It's that like this stuff gets slipped in there that
Hmm.
you think it's fine, but all of a sudden it's teaching your kids stuff you don't want them to learn.
Yeah.
And
For
that's kind of
sure.
the point. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's like, you we should care about this because on one end, regardless of how positive the message is or how much we would agree with what's being portrayed, screens can be incredibly addictive. They can shape our morality. But then there's the unfortunate like reality of the world that we live in, which I guess has always been true, right? I mean, Paul says that Satan is the prince of the power of the air. The world is under the dominion of Satan in a lot of ways, and so God's kingdom won't be fully realized here until the new heavens and the new earth. So we've always been exiles and strangers in a foreign land as Christians. But our culture has taken some pretty drastic shifts in the last decade or so, and we've definitely moved from a Christian-ish culture where at least the values of Christianity predominated the cultural institutions in some ways, to a very post-Christian environment. You can't have the LGBTQ revolution and Christian morality stand at the same time,
Right.
and so you are seeing a lot of that. A lot of these corporations, especially kind of in the media industry, have an agenda. And I can guarantee you, as a Christian parent, that does not match your agenda for your children, and so that is a reason to be concerned. So that's kind of why we're talking about it. So we wanted to give like a few questions for you to ask yourself as you consider, what you're doing with your kids and their kind of screen time. And the first, I think you should form like, what is the purpose of entertainment? Um, why would you watch? And this really isn't just for kids, like you said. This is applicable to everybody. Why would you watch a show? Why would you go to a play? Why would you,
Yeah.
do anything? I'd say on one end, this is just me kind of thinking out loud. On one end, I think simple recreation is a fine answer.
Yeah.
On the seventh day, God rested. We see a principle of Sabbath. We're to enjoy creation. God looked at the creation; He saw that it was good, and we are also called to work in Genesis 2, and Genesis 1 as well. to be fruitful, to multiply, to have dominion. And we talked about this a little bit last week with AI, but I mean, media is a fulfillment of the creation mandate to have dominion over the earth. It's taking the resources of the earth and it's repackaging it in a way to entertain, to create recreation, basically. So on like a purely theoretical level, I'd say media, television, and entertainment is a part of that creation mandate. And we can enjoy these created things as gifts from God. So on one end, I'd say, what's the purpose? It's enjoyment. And that's fine in and of itself. I'd say a second level is to be shaped by the true, the good, and the beautiful. Again, you can have the principle that a good friend, Jesus says, no other, love is laying down your life for your friends, the ones that you love. No greater love is this than lay down your life for your friends. So there's a principle. Obviously, in Christ, we see that at the cross. But you read Lord of the Rings, and you see Samwise Gamgee at the very end of it, as they're approaching Mount Doom, say, Mr. Frodo, I can't carry it for you, but I can carry you. And he lifts him up and he brings him up the mountain. That is a heart-shaping scene, whether you're reading in the book or watching it in the movie, that teaches you this is what a friend is. This is good. So on one side, I'd say it can be pure enjoyment. On another side, I would say it is to shape us into the true, the good, the beautiful.
Yeah, and I would say even more specifically there, like, my kids watch, I've kind of split it up into 3 categories in my mind, and you have 2 categories. So 2 of my categories can be subcategories for one of your categories. One is just enjoyment, and the other 2 that what I allow my kids to watch are what I would call like educational. So that's just like,
learning.
My kids learn their ABCs through
that's good.
The YouTube ABC, songs or whatever. A is for apple, apple. All my kids know. My son is 2; he knows his ABCs. So, and the other one is spiritual. So both I would count the educational and the spiritual under the, what did you call it? Like the formation, like the formative reasons to watch. And so we do that in a couple ways, but also, we watch a lot of like, there's like a channel called Listener Kids, and they have, just new and old redone, it's like Cocomelon, Christian Cocomelon, it's like, Jesus Loves Me type songs, This Little Light of Mine, that kind of thing. And in between the songs, they'll have like some scripture verses in between, and it's just like I want it to imprint on my kids' brains with, if they're watching stuff, at least they're learning some songs about God and stuff like that. And then you can even take it, like you have some VeggieTales. Did you watch? I didn't really watch VeggieTales growing up, so I don't know if it's
never
good or bad.
did.
Did you?
Never
really?
Watched it. Yep.
Man, so I really don't have that much of an opinion on VeggieTales, but
I had friends that did and loved it, but I never did. No.
Yeah.
So
I would say that's the purpose of entertainment, but I do think there are negative reasons why that what the purpose of entertainment is, and that gets into our second question: why am I letting my kid watch TV? Right? Because another purpose of entertainment is I'm tired and don't want to deal with these kids, right?
Yeah.
So let's put them in front of a screen.
Right.
And I've been there before too.
Yep. And I think this is I think the challenging question on this, why am I letting my kid watch TV or watch the tablet or whatever? are you trying to have the TV be you? Are you trying to? I jokingly tell my kids sometimes. I was like, "Hey guys, I've clocked out for the day, so I'm not going to answer any of your questions. I'm off the clock." And they like don't understand what that means. But of course, as a parent, you're never off the clock. It's a
Right.
joke. You can't. But I do think a lot of parents are. I'm tired. I'm gonna let the screen be their parent for 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, and that's a bad reason. I'd like my kid to have some enjoyment. I'd like my kid to be educated. I'd like my kid to be shaped and formed by the story. Those are good reasons. Um, I don't want to deal with my kid right now. That's a bad reason.
Yeah.
And so let's just be honest with ourselves. Um, in general, kind of looking at your habits in general, but also on those specific moments. Why am I doing this right now? Um, Good question to ask.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so too. And let me ask you this. Do you think there's a place for like you come home from work and you're exhausted and you had a bad day? I know I've done this before, where I'm just so tired and I just put on a show with for my kids, but
Hmm.
I'll sit with them, but maybe I'll read a book as they're sitting with me.
Yeah.
I'm like kind of paying attention to the show, but kind of reading. You think there's like a middle ground in that? Because
Well,
um
I've never had a bad day at work, so I don't know. Um, yeah, no, I've definitely done that. Yeah, I mean, look, and I think it's like, let's be honest. Yeah, like life is hard, and sometimes your days are really hard, and sometimes you like being able to zone out can be a gift. And I would,
right.
maybe someone can challenge me on this. In some ways, I'd put that almost underneath that kind of recreation. I think sometimes after a long day, that can be a gift.
Right.
So yeah,
Yeah. I think there's a difference between like using entertainment as a tool
yeah,
and using it as like
functional savior.
yes, yeah.
Yeah,
Maybe that's because I don't want parents out there thinking, oh, I can never have a bad day. Always have to be 100% on, right?
yeah, yeah.
But
I
there's a
think
difference between like saying, I'm done with you, kid. You just go there. I don't care what you're doing. Just leave me alone.
yes,
There's a difference between that and like I'm exhausted and best I can do right now is watch a show with you. And as I like kind of just
yep,
like zone out here on the couch with you, but you're still like present and engaged in some way. And you're not like you're still being a parent. You're just using this, entertainment as a tool and not necessarily like a replacement for you. I think
yeah,
there's a difference between the two.
yeah. Absolutely, yeah. That's a good point. Um, yeah, yeah. I think the tool versus functional savior. It would be also another good question to ask.
Yeah.
Am I viewing this as a tool or am I viewing it as a functional savior? Um, Next question I'd ask is, and I've mentioned this several times. What does this show present as the true, the good, and the beautiful? So let me give an example. Coco Melon, so annoying. The songs. Coco Melon actually presents the true, the good, and the beautiful in a way I would like them to. It's a nuclear family of a mom and a dad
Mm,
who really love each other, and I think two or three siblings. Um, there's apologies, genuine apology when you've sinned against each other. There's genuine like care for one another. There's respect for your parents. Um, and then there's a million annoying songs that get stuck in your head for all of lifetime. The last thing I'll lose when I get Alzheimer's older will be the Coco Melon songs. But so it's a show that is presenting things in this showing something as beautiful that I'd like to. I'll
yeah.
give a different example. My kids, there was this book called like No David or something. I think they thought it was funny because our youngest son is named David. So we got these books and they're fine. Uh, they're just super negative. The parent is always like yelling at the kid.
Mm,
And apparently in the forward, the author wrote like, I felt as a kid I was told no all the time. And I really struggled with that as a kid. And these books are meant to help like teach kids to deal with no.
right.
So I appreciate what he's trying to do, but it just the parents seem mean toward their son, and um, it, so I'm like, I don't. To me, that's showing something as beautiful that's not, and so I'm just like, we're not reading these books because and it's not there's anything specifically wrong with it, but I want you to see and experience like loving parents in stories and respectful children in stories,
Yeah.
and not this weird. It's just very weird to describe. Um, so yeah, I think that's like a good question to consider when you're looking at shows and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's the true, the good, the beautiful. That's something I need to implement a little bit more even into my life and how I choose. I don't always think about it in those terms.
And
But
even because so for those who know me and know the kinds of movies I've watched over the years, and even occasionally quoted from the pulpit of Christ Fellowship Church, they're like, "Wow, your version of the true, the good, and the beautiful seems pretty loose from how I know you." Um, and I think like even some comedies that I have enjoyed over the years would not probably fit this term very well. But I think then there's the question of, are your kids, and this is a parent by parent conscience decision, um, are they mature enough to distinguish the difference between what is actually true, good, and beautiful and what that movie presents as true, good, and beautiful? Um, and can you help them with that? So I'm not saying everything you watch has to get that 100% right, but I think you do need to be conscious of your kid's ability to pick up on that,
yeah,
and distinguish that, right?
yeah,
This is not how I'd like you to pursue things.
yeah,
This leads to, whatever, even if you can enjoy the entertainment in a minute. And that's a very kind of case by case,
yeah.
parent by parent decision.
And I guess, asking the opposite question is almost just as helpful, right? Where sometimes things can be fairly neutral. And so if they are, then is this presenting something that is false, bad, and ugly,
Yeah,
kind of like
right.
the No David thing, right? And
Yes.
so,
Yep.
because I know there's one, it's not just Coca but there's one kid's song where the kids like say no to the dad or something.
Yeah. It's like,
And we don't let them watch that one because
yeah,
we don't want our kids learning to just
right.
disobey,
Right.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think even with movies too, it's kind of like, because with some of the comedies, it's like, yeah, is this forming you in a bad, false, or ugly way? And if it really does cross a threshold, then it's like, yeah, maybe you shouldn't watch it.
Yep.
But maybe it's just kind of like there's some redeeming things, there's some like, I don't know, immoral things in there, but it's
Mm-hmm.
like fairly neutral,
Yep.
there's it is up to, I guess, everyone's conscience. But
Yep.
maybe, yeah, does it present the true, the good, the beautiful, and sub question, or does it present the false, the bad, and the ugly?
Yeah. And then kind of related to that is, how does this or does this uh prepare or sharpen my affections for Christ?
Yeah,
You know, I mean, sorry to go all Lord of the Rings on everybody, but here I am. Um, when at the end of Lord of the Rings, uh, and Frodo and Samwise see Gandalf, and they thought he was dead, and he's back alive, and they see him, and they say, "How can this be? Is every sad thing about to come untrue?" And Gandalf just starts laughing, and it is a incredible picture of the resurrection. And the reality that Christ's resurrection is going to make every sad thing come untrue. Or when he in the Two Towers, they're all stuck in Helm's Deep and they're all about to die, and then Aragorn remembers that Gandalf had said something like, on the fifth day at sunrise, look to the east at my coming, and he comes riding down the hill on this white horse, just blazing in glory, and he saves all of them. Those are the kinds of things that I know. I mean, Tolkien wrote in there on purpose.
Right.
And so not every movie has that, but I'm like, man, that sharpens my affections for Christ. That makes me think on the second coming. And I'd say even, Harry Potter, spoiler alert, at the end, he's about to die and he basically sacrifices himself. And I don't know if Rowling meant that on purpose as a Christian allusion. How could you not really?
I think from what I can understand, she pulled from a lot of different, not necessarily religions, but like source materials.
Sure.
One of which being some Christian themes. So,
right.
But she's
see
not
that,
a Christian, and I don't think she meant to promote, quote unquote, promote Christianity. But
yeah,
but she took it from.
Yeah, I see that scene, and I'm just moved. So how does the entertainment shape your heart toward Christ? I think is a important question.
And part of it too is helping your kids see the gospel in the stories, right?
Yes.
Like, for example, because you mentioned in the sermon, my favorite movie is Forrest Gump, and so I watched it this past week. And I just kept thinking,
great movie.
One, it's like Jenny is an example of how not to live, right?
Yep.
But I don't think it was intended this way, but it's like the story of Forrest and Jenny is actually very similar to Hosea.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
And I don't think they pulled from Hosea. I just think it just reflected a gospel truth in the movie. And that's what made it what pulls your heartstrings, and not just Hosea, but ultimately who Christ is, right? I think loves us through our sin. Our sin doesn't push him away, that kind of idea. Right. And that's not intended by the filmmaker, but a truth that we can pull out to teach. Right.
The asking the question, how does this show, movie, book show the gospel? I think it's a good one too. And that's where I think you can really dialogue with your kids after, because I guarantee you, even if they did not mean it, it is it's there. Every good story really has some source in the gospel, and that's just so look for it, talk about it, even if they didn't intend it. How could we see it this way? All those things really important.
It is interesting to me how, as our culture becomes more post-Christian, like more like godless in a lot of ways.
Yep.
That the popular movies now are either like Finding Your True Self, like you mentioned in the beginning, or you have popular shows like I'm blanking, the HBO show with the
bad one. Game of Thrones.
Oh, Game of Thrones, which only shows the depravity of man without any kind of savior. And isn't that interesting? When you take out God, what are the two things that people focus on that relate to now? The self, finding yourself, and the depravity of man without any hope of a savior. I think that's really interesting. And that's actually why I don't like a lot of new TV shows and stuff. That's why are there so many remakes? Because older movies follow that. I heard this from Mark Driscoll, like beginning, middle, beginning movies, where you have a beginning, a problem, and then a new beginning, right? There's some kind of hope that is restarted. And that makes for a great story.
It's a great point.
And so although people like Game of Thrones because it's so like quote unquote real, like it's like so raw and real. There's no hope in there. I mean,
Mm,
that's not the only reason it's a bad show, but
right. Yep.
but it's
Yep.
just kind of like I like there's like I don't, and that's why people had such a problem with the ending and all this stuff too. It's just like there's no hope of a savior. There's no hope of a new
Interesting.
beginning, a new heavens and new earth. What, like an idea of that, you know?
Yeah.
So just
So yeah, having the kind of storyline follow a trajectory of hope um actually is really important. I actually think the movie yeah, Top Gun 2 that came out like a year ago.
oh man, that movie's fantastic.
Everyone loved that movie. Few reasons, right? Number one, there was like no agenda. There was no hidden agenda in the
Right,
movie. It was just a good movie. Number two, there was like no sex stuff in the movie. There
right,
was one scene where you assumed something, but they didn't show anything. That was it,
right.
just, And then, but I would argue most deeply, it follows the creation, fall, redemption, restoration gospel storyline. And, he basically he gives himself up at the end to save someone else. And when you're thinking he has died, he actually hasn't. And there's kind of I'd say resurrection at the end, where he comes
Yeah.
back and there's this hopeful end celebration where every sad thing comes untrue. And so I think like looking for that. And then even if you watch things with your kids that don't have that, using the like, how does this show me the gospel pointing to, wow, didn't you notice how what a hopeless ending. And that's true if we don't follow Christ. It is a hopeless ending. Um, so I think that can be helpful. Um, Another question to ask is like, how comfortable am I to be absent during the show or the movie that they're watching, or should I be present? Um, I think different parents will have different consciences on this one.
Right.
Um, but yeah, I mean, you. So we do. I guess is bleeding a little bit into the next topic. We're going to talk about what we do, but we do family movie night. We call it every Friday. We watch a movie together, and it's typically off the Disney Plus app. And you know, so I saw a new movie that came out. I read the story, and I was like, oh, that seems interesting. So we started playing it, and it was a cartoon. And pretty quickly, I was like, is are those two dudes holding their hands right there?
Wait, was it Strange World?
Yes. Yes. Um, and
Man, that's why you gotta read all the stuff I read, man. I
we got 5 minutes in and I was like, nope. Um, and, and again, like, I want my children to know that there are practicing homosexuals in the world. I want them to know um, how to treat them with dignity and respect, um, to not, give them a weird look. Like that is important to me. Uh, but they're 2 and 5 and newborn, and I don't want something being presented as the true good and the beautiful that is not true, good, and beautiful.
Yep.
And so we turned that movie off, and they were like, why can't we watch that? And I was like, just, we just can't. Um, so yeah, you really need to check. You got to know what they're watching. You can look up like parent guides on Google and
You can.
stuff, and they'll let you know like different scenes, what you're dealing with. So that might be a good recommendation if you're going to not be present, especially younger kids, having watched it yourself previously or done some kind of good research on parent guides and stuff could be helpful. Because yeah, the sad thing is you just you just don't know. You just don't know anymore.
Yep. You just don't know. Yeah,
Um,
I always read reviews. I use a couple sites. One of them being there's a site called Common Sense Media, and I don't know who runs it, so I I don't know if it's like a Christian site or not. But I just read the reviews, and it's like pretty interesting because sometimes the reviews are like, this has not enough diversity, and the
right.
other ones are like, this the same movie, this has too much diversity.
Hmm.
And like, but then you get to read the reviews of why they said what they did and then make your own judgment on it, you know.
Yep. Yep.
um and but yeah, understanding what your kids watch. I know for us, i'll I'll sometimes let like, if like Meredith and I are both working, I'll let Thomas watch something by himself, but it's only stuff that we have watched before,
Yeah.
so we know that there's nothing. Yeah.
Yeah. There's some shows, like for the longest time, Hannah just loved Sophia the First was her like
is
cartoon
that
of
the
choice.
is that the princess one?
Yeah. Princess with the purple dress or whatever.
Okay, yeah, yeah.
And that was safe to, you know, let her just watch and kind of be in the other room doing something. So yeah, and you know, I'd say this with um along with AI, I said something like, you know, be discerning, but don't be fearful.
Right.
Uh I think this is the same. Like uh an overreaction to this is just living in constant fear that the media is going to come assault your children. And be calm, carry on. Jesus is sovereign. Be discerning about what you allow into your home and into your kids' minds, but don't let it overwhelm and paralyze you with fear.
Right.
That you know, I mean, you know, okay, so the Lion King kind of teaches like a little bit of animism. You know, uh, do are my kids going to start worshiping? You know,
Right.
Mufasa when no, I really I don't think so.
Right.
Do I need to explain that dead lions can't appear to you in the clouds of the sky as their spirit and talk to you? I don't think that I do, you know, so I'm just going to watch The Lion King and enjoy it. You know, like there is an overreaction to these things that I
Right.
think is unhealthy. Um,
It's like my
so
son's favorite character in The Lion King is Scar, but he calls him Uncle Scar.
like
Like,
it's his uncle. Yeah.
right. And I'm like, should I be concerned?
I'm kind of worried that you like him. Um, and I have seen over the years, there is like there is a discerning among uh, parents that's good. And then there's a helicopter quality parent that is bad, that is like your kid does live in a fallen world and you cannot save him or her from that fallen world. And
Yeah.
so, you know, discerning is good. Being careful of what kind of entertainment comes into your kids' heads and hearts is good. Um, Trying to guard them from the world forever. And the key there is forever. How long and how intense you do the guarding is not possible. And so they do need to be uh, they need to be aware of the world they live in.
And learn how to interact with it and to
Yes,
see truth in it, right?
yes, and
No,
so
that's a great point.
yeah, so sometimes watching movies that conflict with your worldview can be a really helpful thing if you're going to engage in a dialogue with them afterwards about it. Because like here is the reality, right? Like our kids are going to have friends who have two mommies or two daddies. Like that is going to happen. That's the world that we live in. Um, so that they have to be trained. Um, well, they will have those friends unless you totally shelter them from the neighbors that you're probably going to have. Like that's it's probably going to happen, right?
Right.
So you got to figure out a way to how do you both raise and train your kids to see the imago Dei in everyone, to respect and value each person made in the image of God, to know that marriage is between a man and a woman, and to live as salt and light in a dark and decaying world, and be known both for our grace and our truth. That's a tall order. And so the kind of entertainment you introduce could actually help prepare to have those kind of conversations, but you got to be discerning what it is and why you're doing it and when you're doing it. But it's a lot to consider.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
So we wanted to kind of end with like, what do you do in your household? How do you think through screen time, entertainment, movies, shows? So what does the Chin household look like?
Yeah, so we have what we call screen time. Sometimes it's in the morning, sometimes it's in the afternoon. We try to keep it an hour or less. We recently got the advice to do screen time in the afternoon because our kids like wake up earlier and earlier, and the first thing they want to do is watch something. And if that like dopamine hit gets removed from them, they might actually sleep in more. And so I think we're trying to switch that, except for, we've been sick for 4 weeks. So we just kind of been, I will say we are lax when they're sick or we're sick. We are more lax.
They threw out
you
you threw out the rules.
Yeah.
You let your kids watch Game of Thrones and you're like, whatever, we're sick,
Right.
Yeah.
So we do, something called sick day, movie day.
Yeah.
And they watch a decent amount of TV on those days. But in general, the shows that we let them watch when they're kids, we watch like Listener Kids, which is like or Slugs and Bugs. Those are Christian YouTube channels.
Mm-hmm.
There's like Cocomelon. There's a couple of like ABC Kids TV. They learn about alphabet shapes, stuff like that. That's for my 2-year-old Sammy. For the older kids, I have a 4-year-old and a almost 6-year-old. My daughter's favorite show is Number Blocks, and I'll tell you what, that is a great show. It's just about number blocks who teach you how to add and multiply. And my daughter knows how to add and multiply now, and it's amazing.
There you go.
It's a great show. Each episode's like 5 minutes. There's no like obviously political agenda. I mean, it's literally just teaching you how to count and multiply and stuff. I let, they watch Paw Patrol sometimes. I found that to be pretty good. My son likes Land Before Time.
Gets so sad though.
I know. Well, they have all these like shows and all the stuff now around it.
Oh, really?
So, my kind of rule is anything made before 2019, I feel fairly comfortable with. I'm not kidding. Like I look at the date, and if it's before 2019, I feel like pretty good about. And anything after 2019, I get more like I'm more vigilant. Thomas watches Octonauts, which is like, sea animals teaching you how to be like a good person kind of thing.
Yeah. That's a good show.
There's a book by Andrew Peterson called The Wingfeather Saga, and
I've heard about this.
Made it into a TV show. I really want to show my kids because I've heard it's really good. But I've watched Star Wars with Thomas, but we skip a lot. We skip probably half the movie because I don't want him to be like scared by any of it.
Yeah.
But he likes lightsabers and X-Wings and TIE fighters and stuff. Of course, his favorite character is Darth Vader, but
naturally.
But at least it's not the Emperor. The Emperor scares me at least.
It's freaky, man.
But yeah, I would say, in general, we let them. It's like Paw Patrol, Number Blocks, Shapes, Listener Kids. That's kind of what we watch around our house. It's pretty. We keep it to a simple few. We watch all the episodes with them. I've let Thomas sometimes watches like the Lego shows, and they're like pretty neutral too. And so I don't know if they're necessarily teaching like good Lord of the Rings type stuff, but there's nothing bad in them that we've seen at least.
Sure.
because a lot of those shows have 4 episodes. I've seen every episode 5 times, and I haven't
Naturally.
caught anything at least.
Yeah.
Oh, one thing to be weary about, and I forgot to mention earlier, is have you seen Mr. Beast, the YouTube
No,
channel? Oh, okay.
no.
I love Mr. Beast, but recently his like best friend and the guy who these are for like if you have like late elementary, middle school, high school kids, if you're listening, they probably watch Mr. Beast. Mr. Beast is very clean. There's nothing he's stayed out of the political stuff until like 2 weeks ago, where his best friend is now gender binary or trans, and he was in a lot of shows, and he's kind of gone radio silent for the past 2 weeks. And
Interesting.
it's kind of remained to be seen, like, are you going to promote this or not? And if he does, I would be very careful, because you can see this guy become more and more feminine over the past like few months, and now he's just full blown like wearing tank tops and stuff, like weird stuff.
Wow.
So I wanted to give that warning today too, if your kids are older and watch Mr. Beast too, just to keep your eye on that.
Yeah.
But yeah, what do you guys watch? What do you guys do?
Interesting. All right, so I guess a few things. We really do try to keep it to a minimum. No screens, no anything, breakfast, lunch, or dinner at the table. No
That's great.
phones. If I ever look at my phone, I'm admonished by my better half to stop. She really never does at the table. They have tablets. They're only allowed to use their tablets when we take long trips. So they never watch their personal tablets in the home or on a ride to church or anything local. If we're going to visit Hillary's parents, which are 2.5 hours away, that's when they can watch them. When we go on a vacation, that's when they can watch their tablets. Otherwise, no tablets.
Oh yeah, and can I interject too?
Yeah.
Our kids have tablets, and we let them play this game called ABC Mouse that I paid for, which is just educational.
Mm-hmm.
But you can, like, if you use an iPad, you can lock down that thing.
Yeah.
So like my kids can't get in with the password. Like all the videos are set to TVY, meaning that even if you click the apps, it will not show up. You cannot access it without a password. You can make it so anything they do, you can check on your own phone what's happening. We don't have to do that because, my kids are so young, but make sure you understand how to use the parental guides on the tablets. That's
that's good. Yeah. So we really don't want like individual entertainment going on. So you need to learn to compromise and enjoy what your siblings enjoy. And if you can't do that, then sorry, no one's watching anything. So that's kind of how we do it. We don't really have like a set time to watch stuff, and it is pretty rare. Maybe some in the afternoon. I'm a big like go play in the basement, go play outside, go to your read a book. Don't become a screen junkie.
Right.
We do family movie night every Friday. So as a pastor, we take Fridays off. And Hillary is a counselor. She counsels on Friday. So I watch the kids Friday and often will tell her, I've dealt with a lot of hard things this week. I've counseled people. I have worked on a sermon. I've read deep theological books. I've led leadership meetings. Sometimes caring for the kids on Friday is by far the hardest thing I've done all week long.
Right.
And then so when she comes home, she brings Papa John's pizza, and we all watch a movie together. So that's fun. So that's kind of how we do it. This has made me think, this podcast. There's a book I read called The Tech Wise Family by Andy Crouch, which is fantastic. And we should probably do a podcast series on it because it gives some really good feedback I will say, yeah, when people get sick, we kind of throw the rules out of the door, out the window. And one time we all got the stomach bug, and it was the worst 2 days of my entire life. I prayed that God would take me home, literally take me home. And my sweet daughter, Hannah, we laid on that couch for hours and we watched The Hobbit. And that girl was way too young to watch that. I paused it many times, like, are you scared of this orc? And she's like, no, Daddy, it's okay. I was like, God bless you, little child. So Hillary was like, I gotta move around. I've been sitting around for too long. And Hannah and I sat there and watched The Hobbit. So sometimes, I have shown parts of James Bond to both of my kids, and Sarah, a 3-year-old, loves James Bond. We would obviously fast forward through certain scenes, let the listener understand. But yeah, so I'm maybe not as strict as you might hope I would be watching The Hobbit and parts of James Bond with my young girls. So now you're going to question all my wisdom and thoughts on everything. So that's kind of how we do it.
Nice.
I watch the news a fair amount, and they'll roll their eyes. Dad's watching the news again, because I'm 70 years old. So there you go. But that's kind of how we do it. Just hope I don't screw up my kids too bad. That's kind of my parenting goal: minimal screw upness.
Yes,
I do. And I will say this: I may be overly conscious of this. I am aware that as a pastor, my kids are going to get plenty of spiritual exposure and spiritual shaping. And I know this sounds like counterintuitive. I'm actually conscious not to overdo it. And Tim Keller one time said one time asked him, what's the best thing you did for family worship in your home? And he said to stop doing family worship. And someone looked at him like, you're a heretic. And he said, we recognize that our kids we were going to church stuff and worship stuff all the time as a family. And they were beginning to resent feeling like things were just kind of getting shoved down their throat. And so for a season, we actually put it on pause. And I think it was actually really helpful for our kids. And so I want to show them all this spiritual content and stuff, but I'm also conscious of their pastors' kids, and I want to make sure I'm not force feeding them. So I'm trying to walk that line. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, the idea of in the world but not of the world is it's a kind of a tightrope to walk.
It is,
but you want to try to walk it.
Yeah. So that's our thoughts on what are our kids watching. We'd love to hear from you. What do you do as a parent? How do you help kind of safeguard your kids with the screen? And we'll probably be back to go through a series on the TechWise family. So stay tuned for that. Any closing thoughts from you, Daniel?
No, thanks for listening with us, and hope it was helpful. And if you have your own advice, we'd love to hear it too. We're two parents that are just learning and growing it as well.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thanks for joining us for Monday Musings. We will talk to you again next week.